Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this special broadcast this evening. We're live and we are exploring the issue of how do we gain wisdom in addressing this whole vaccine around COVID-19. So I'm going to be joined by some experts, some professionals this evening for what's going to be 20 to 30 minutes. We think it's probably more likely to be 30 minutes, to be honest, but it will be finished in 30 minutes time. And we're so delighted that you're joining us. And if you want to put in the chat where you're joining us from, that will be fantastic. And throughout the chat in the evening, you can also post your questions and we'll be trying to come around to some of those things. Hey, listen, I'm no expert, I'm a pastor. And when we're faced with situations of circumstances that we don't have skills in and we don't have knowledge in, the best thing to do is to seek out those who do. And that's what we're trying to do this evening. I have got three agendas this evening. and they're all emanating from me being a pastor. The first one is that I desire that people are well. We've seen COVID ravaging people's lives. In the UK alone, 60,000 plus deaths this year have been attributed to that. We've seen just the impact on, I think it's 1.7 million people have experienced the illness in some form. We've seen our economy ravaged. I think early this year, in a short space of time, it declined by 25% on GDP. And the implications on poverty, and if you're involved in any church food bank, then you will just know that poverty is real and it is growing in our communities. The impact upon mental health is significant, and there are all sorts of implications upon that in terms of relationship breakdowns and so on. So as a pastor, my desire is that people are well, and I see that at the moment that many people are not. Secondly, my hope is that we as God's people will be wise. And wisdom is more than just common sense. In James 1, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously. And there's some wonderful expressions of wisdom in that book of wisdom, the book of Proverbs in the scriptures. In Proverbs 12:15, it says, the way of a fool is right in their own eyes, but a wise person listens to advice. And I'm sure all of us face circumstances and we think, I've got a feeling that's what I should do. And we've all got that gut instinct. But there are times, when that gut instinct can be cultured by all sorts of things, particularly around fears and anxieties, about issues of mistrust and so on. And so it's wise to seek counsel, to try and get as much input into our lives as possible. And that's what we're seeking to do this evening. So I desire us as a pastor to be well, desire us as a pastor to be wise, but also thirdly and finally, I desire us as a pastor to be Christ-like. And we live in a world that's polarized views, that people stand the other side of social media lines and they shout at each other. And that's not what I believe is Christ-like. I believe disagreement is fine. In fact, healthy disagreement is an important part of life. But I do believe that we need to be Christ-like in how we do that. And there are some derogatory ways that can so easily slip off the tongue when someone has a difference of opinion to us. Jesus said in Matthew 5 that we shouldn't call someone a fool. And when you strongly hold on to a view and a belief, it's really easy to do that. Colossians 4, talking about sort of evangelism, it says, let your conversations be gracious and attractive so that you'll have the right response for everybody. Ephesians 4, don't use foul or abusive language. And we've got to learn to engage with different thoughts without engaging in derogatory language. It's not honoring to Christ. And as God's people, that is important to us. Terms such as, you need to wake up, in a context of a discussion can be perceived very condescending. And so I want to encourage us to be Christ-like, to listen well, to have considered speech, and to posture ourselves humbly. There may be something that we may learn in listening to others. So just in summary, my agenda is that we'll be wise, or we'll be well, we'll be wise, and we'll be Christ-like. There is no other agenda. We're not going to try and convince you to take a vaccine, and we're not going to tell you not to. We just want to find out more of the facts about the technicalities of this vaccine. And I've invited two active members of Rediscover Church in Exeter, people I know well, people I trust, people who I know have a professional background of training and experience, and they're going to contribute this evening. I didn't ask them what their conclusion was before I invited them. I invited them because of their insights and their skills. And I invited them as people who I believe have much integrity. So we're going to introduce those. One of them, Mary, is unable to be with us live. So she has engaged already in some videos, and so I'm going to interact some of those in the evening. But Afi, the other guest this evening, is going to be live, and we're going to introduce him in just a moment. But the first question I want to look at tonight is about medical ethics. How independent are healthcare specialists? And Mary is going to, as a GP, active at a practice in Plymouth, and Mary is going to talk about the code of conduct of those who sign up to become GPs and doctors. And so here is Mary talking about that.
So I'm a GP. I work in Plymouth. I'm also an addiction specialist. I'm a clinical fellow at the medical school here, and I'm a lecturer. I do all sorts of other bits at the medical school. And I have quite a broad holistic approach to medicine, actually. I am quite interested in functional and lifestyle medicine. I also have a degree in Chinese medicine. So I'm not purely science-based focused. But what I thought would be good was for me to tell you how doctors make decisions. We are bound by very, very high levels of ethics. The Hippocratic Oath, to start with, which isn't Christian, but then medical ethics, which is based in Christian principles. I'm just going to tell you what they are. First one is autonomy, that everybody has a right to do what they want with their body, including confidentiality. Number 2, beneficence, which means do good. Number 3 is non-maleficence, which means do no harm. Number 4 is justice, and that in this situation is about everybody having an equal access to resources, and that also we steward well our resources, the money that we have in the UK to pay for health, and that everybody has an equal chance to access the resource that we have. So in this situation, we don't have an individual doctor making an individual decision about one person. We have a group of doctors and health scientists making a decision about a whole population, and they are using the same principles. So autonomy means we're not going to have any health passports and vaccine passports. Everybody is trying to do good. There are nothing secret about what people are trying to do. Everybody has the best interests of the population of Britain at their hearts, okay? And the people that are deciding what to do are not run by the government. They're not getting backhanders for approving a vaccine or anything like that. They're independent. Do no harm. Well, that's tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes it comes down to just weighing up the pros and the cons, and do no harm might be doing the least bad thing. And at the moment, we have a vaccine which is coming out, and it appears to be safe. We don't know what the long-term effects might be, but then we've got to weigh that up against the damage that it's doing to our society and the number of people that are dying from it. And justice. Yeah, we're making sure that the people that need this the most are getting it, but also we have to look at the long-term cost of this on our society, and spending our money on this vaccine appears to be a good way of spending money at present.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate your input there, and we'll come back to Mary in a little bit. But I'm going to bring into the conversation now live Afi. Dr. Afi, welcome. Afi, lovely to welcome you this evening. And I probably should put on the screen your full title here so people can see your credentials. You work in research, not on COVID, but using technologies that are very, very similar, and you're working on finding solutions for diabetes, aren't you? That's the main specialism
That's
that you
right.
work with. In that whole world of research, how possible is it that somebody could manufacture a vaccine that has encoded in it secretly some track and trace, as some of the rumors are around that? How possible is it for somebody to deceptively introduce those things into a vaccine without the rest of the medical community finding out? Could you just maybe talk through about the integrity of and the peer testing of vaccine research?
So once a vaccine is being developed and it's going through all the safety procedures, there's a peer review of what the clinical trials is going to be all about, and these aspects are not hidden. If you write on your web page clinicaltrials.gov, all clinical trials, what they've used are in there. Nothing is hidden. And once the clinical trial is over, they publish the research results, not only on the site, but also in medical journals. Now, you don't just upload into a medical journal, but your peers look into what you've written, they assess the methodology, they look into the ins and outs, the calculations you've used, are they faulty, are they right? And even if the reviewer somehow were biased towards the vaccine that you've produced, some other peer would pick up the article and would start critiquing right on the website. And once the critiquing gets to a point, the article is retracted and the publishers are called to question. And if they cannot address the questions, sometimes it gets to actually stripping your credentials over time, and it can be a very daunting task.
That's really helpful. So there is a peer review system. I'm going to ask you a question now about a technical word, a technical phrase that we're hearing in the news quite often about RNA vaccines. It's a new technology. Could you just maybe explain how an RNA vaccine is different to others and how historic this moment is about RNA as a methodology?
So you could group vaccines into two groups. We've got live attenuated vaccine, which is the microorganism. It could be a bacteria or a virus that is somehow cultured or denatured in a way so that it doesn't become as virulent as it was when it was the normal microorganism. So, for example, the TB vaccine, what was done with the TB vaccine was the bacteria was grown over time until it lost its virulent factor. And what they do now is just take that vaccine and they inject into you. Is the BCG vaccine. And so that's a live vaccine. The other vaccine is the attenuated, or the part of the microorganism. And that is where many of other vaccines fall, where they take part of the microorganism and they give it to you so that your body responds as if it's seen the microorganism and then raises an immune response. Now, RNA vaccines will fall under this group as well as DNA vaccine. But what is messenger RNA? Well, into each and every body is built DNA, which is very unique to you. A good example to explain what messenger RNA is, for example, is if you having a meal, your body has to produce enzymes. Enzymes are proteins. The message as to what that protein that is called an enzyme should look like is encoded in your DNA. And so your body copies that information into a small strand of DNA that is called RNA, and it's called RNA because of a small change in the sugar that makes it up. DNA and RNA fall under the same group called nucleic acids. And so basically, as a whole, each microorganism has a DNA backbone or an RNA backbone from which the message is copied as to what protein should be produced. And for the messenger RNA vaccine that is being produced at this point, the virus, which is the coronavirus, it's called corona because it's spiky like a crown. The message needed to produce the crown protein or the spike protein has been extracted and slightly modified so that it's stable enough, because RNA is very unstable, and that will bring us somewhere to questions that link up to how it's stored at -70 and not -20. But the point I'm trying to make is they've taken that message that codes for the spike protein, and what they're giving it to you so that your body produces a spike protein which will mimic the presence of the virus, and then your body will respond accordingly, thinking the virus is here. And once the first one is given and then the second one, you get an even bigger response.
So
I hope that was clear.
Well, you're talking about things that are beyond many of our experience here, and I know this is your world all the time. So thank you for trying to put it in terms that do help us. But then the body remembers. It's almost like seeing a photograph of the virus,
That's right.
and it remembers. It takes a copy of that, and
So
then
so
if it sees it again in the future, then it recognizes it, and your immunization system will fight against it. Is that the theory?
So theoretically, to use that analogy, is once you're given a vaccine, it's like taking a mock shot of the criminal. And the second time the offense is committed, they don't need to start. They just go straight to the database. We remember what it looks like, and they produce a specialized unit called antibodies that go straight to target the microorganism that is invading.
So, what are the biggest questions around this new vaccine? Because it's like messenger RNA has never been used before, is it? It's been studied for years, but it's never been used. So what are the biggest questions around this?
I think one of the biggest questions was how the messenger RNA was going to get into into the cellular, which is the last unit, functional unit of an individual, how it was going to get inside. But what Pfizer and Moderna have done is use lipid molecules. They call it nanolipids. It's simply oils, and so they put the RNA inside, and because the gate into the cell is like oil. Oil dissolves in oil, and so it lets the messenger RNA go inside. And so one of the big questions was how it was going to go inside, and they solved it with that. But another question was how long the immunity was going to last. And to be honest, the scientific community can answer it beyond 10 months for which the clinical trials was done. So we know that the immune response is there, but how long it's going to stay. Are people who have been infected with COVID going to need to take the vaccine? Is the immune response for someone who has had COVID higher than someone who is taking the messenger RNA? I think those are the controversies. But when it comes to the safety, it's not a problem because someone like me who works with these messenger RNAs in the lab can tell you that it's only a maximum of 4 days and your body gets rid of it. Although they've tried to modify it so that it's stable enough to enact the immune response that is needed for memory, so that in case the virus comes in, it can be targeted. But it's still not going to last very long. And that is why the messenger RNA vaccine is being stored at -70. Because if you hold a piece of RNA, unlike DNA, it just dissolves. It just disappears. You breathe on it and it just goes away.
So it lasts for a few days. So it's a bit like someone coming to visit you in your house. They make all sorts of modifications, but then they leave and they've gone. But the changes are still there.
That's right.
Some people have expressed concern that it changes your DNA, and whether that's playing God. But it doesn't actually change your DNA, does it?
It doesn't. Like I said, the messenger RNA is a message, and once the message is delivered, it's destroyed. And there are specialized enzymes within your body. And to be honest, Pfizer and Moderna had to really work hard to avoid the immune system in the first instance, because once any foreign strand of messenger RNA or DNA is in your system, your body knows it's foreign. It can identify self from non-self. And so they've done it so that it's able to actually just produce the spike protein. And once the job is done, it's cleared off. It cannot last for more than weeks. It would be gone. And that's why you need a booster.
So it definitely doesn't change your DNA. There's another rumor that goes around that it's there's some conspiracy to put tracking devices in everybody. You talked about peer testing, and that would be picked up if that was the case. But there's no way that's going to happen, is there?
It's not possible, and even if you did, it's only a matter of time before a scientist picks up that you've inserted an additional strand onto the vaccine, and that can cause an uproar. I was telling my colleagues, it can't, colleagues who were doubting, I said, it can't happen in the first messenger RNA vaccine. Messenger RNA vaccine is the future. And the reason I say that is not like I'm advocating for vaccines, but is because it could pave way for solving disease conditions such as cancers, autoimmune diseases. MS might just be a thing of the past if we get this right. And so, as much as we're about to prevent the pandemic from going further, it's opening, it's a vista for all sorts of treatments.
Wow. And I know someone's asked this in a question already, and so let me just see if I can find the question that was articulated. Should we be concerned as Christians about the link between COVID-19 vaccine development and the use of cell lines from aborted fetuses?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines. Messenger RNA can be synthesized without the need of any material other than just chemicals. You don't need anything like cells. Now, when you go to the Oxford vaccine, it's a slightly different vaccine. What the Oxford guys have done is they've taken a virus from the stool of chimpanzee monkeys. It causes flu in monkeys. And what they've done is taken out the DNA material and put in the material that codes again for the spike protein, because the spike protein, I didn't explain, even though it gives the virus the crown shape, it's quite important for the virus infecting your cells. It uses it to bind to your cells and then goes inside. And so they're encoding for it, because if that is neutralized, then the virus can't cause any harm. And so what the Oxford guys have done is put in the message into this virus that causes a flu, and then they've grown the virus in cell lines. Now, let me address Roland's question. When you're dying, or when you die, some people offer their bodies for science. Now, mind you, these scientists, especially the scientists who used the hex cells. The hex cells were developed in the Netherlands, and what happened was someone genuinely came and did an abortion, and instead of throwing the fetus, the kidney cells were taken and grown. Now,
and this goes back, was it 1973 that happened?
that was 1973.
Many of the vaccines, so if someone goes abroad now and has a vaccine, that often it's been developed from that original cell. Am I right in thinking that?
I'll just make the correction here. Not all cell lines are developed from fetuses. One of the cell lines that is used for like the polio vaccine is the HeLa cell line that was developed from the uterus of a Black woman who came, a biopsy was collected and the cell was grown in the lab, and it just kept growing. And to this day, it's being used to culture these viruses to develop it. So not all of them are like that, but it's a question of should we have just thrown the dead fetus? The scientist doesn't know why the woman aborted. You and I don't know. Actually, if you read the history well, nobody knows. The woman could have had complications. It could have been, no one knows. But should we really, is it in our position to judge? But God has given us the knowledge. I'm not advocating for people to abort here, but I'm only saying some people would give up their bodies for sciences, and it's that case where it was, should we throw it or should we actually use the kidney cells? And so these kidney cells were grown and modified by putting a virus in it and immortalizing it some sort of, and the virus was grown in it. And once the virus is grown, then they can use it to make the vaccine.
It's a complex topic, isn't it? And
it is.
And you know, it's a great question to ask, and it's a great question to consider. I'm just mindful of time. I wanted to keep people no longer than 30 minutes tonight, and I know you've already agreed, as has Mary, to come back and do another one of these rather than extend it beyond the half hour. I didn't want to abuse people's time in that regard. So if you would like us to do another one of these sessions to look at and answer questions, maybe just put in the chat, I'm up for it, or something along those lines, and that will let us know there's an audience for this. If I could just come to just a final section really to conclude this. asking about the vaccine itself, there's quite a few questions that are coming in now, but just a question of, will the vaccine rollout strategy allow us to get back to normal life? So if, as the government are announcing it, will it bring us back to normal life? And I'm just going to go back to Mary, who's just going to briefly talk around that.
It may be that ultimately we need to have herd immunity in the UK. So at the moment they're just targeting the people that are most likely to die with a vaccine, which at the moment seems to be people with the health conditions and eventually everybody over 50. But this may not stop COVID circulating in the community. We don't know if it stops asymptomatic transmission as yet. We don't know if that amount of vaccination will be enough to stop COVID circulating. It may be that we need to have perhaps 80%, 90% of us vaccinated against COVID to stop it spreading in the community. And so then you're making a decision of, actually, am I having the COVID vaccine just for me, or am I having it for the good of my community? So it's not then just about you, it's about everybody else as well, and your impact on other people.
That's a fascinating point there, Afi, that of course we tend to ask this question from a personal perspective. Will this harm me? Will this affect me? Will this have long-term effects? And just to summarize, the actual vaccine itself, it goes through the system very, very quickly from what you're saying. But it's been deemed to be safe in the 10-month research that has been given to this. But no one knows in the medical community just whether there are long-term effects. So there is a risk to this, but is the risk just a personal one about, can I avoid getting COVID? Or if I get a vaccine, does that mean I will avoid getting it? Mary was just saying there that there's a community-wide benefit to this as well, that we are loving our neighbour as ourselves, maybe, as a result of getting a vaccine. On balance, Afi, and we're going to be finishing very soon, do you think this vaccine is beneficial to society?
I think what the vaccine is really going to do is curb down the rate of getting COVID. And what it might actually do will be to, if it slows down people from getting COVID, then you have fewer number of cases, and then you gradually be able to group those who have the virus constantly and find out a source. What we don't know is whether, like Mary said, is whether transmission is going to be stopped. But we know that if you've got the vaccine, you're less likely to have COVID or to develop the symptoms because your body would get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay. And people are certainly asking for another session, so we will organise that fairly soon, because very soon people in our church are going to be invited to get their vaccine, and we want to help them to do that with wisdom. But on that point about the impact on society, I know some people are asking, is it 100% safe? My understanding of any vaccine, if you go to look at lawsuits, that every vaccine really has got people who have taken the manufacturers to court because no vaccine is 100% safe. So we can't say that. The medical community will not profess that, will they?
No, they won't. They won't.
And if you wouldn't mind me just asking you a personal question, I'm pretty sure I cleared asking this with you
Yes.
before you came on. Knowing what you know, would you personally have the vaccine?
Personally, I will have the vaccine, and I'm going to explain. For me, it's not whether the vaccine is safe or not. To me, my questions are: is the vaccine going to make any huge difference? Given that I've already had antibodies for COVID, which shows I've had the infection already, is it going to make a huge difference, or is it going to protect other people? And if it's going to do that, then why not have it? I'm not going to be doing it for me anymore, but for the rest of the wider community. But
Well,
yeah, for safety reasons, yes.
That's really helpful. And, as someone we know and love, with your expertise, that is a really helpful thing to hear, to give comfort to those people who are also considering this question. There's a few sort of comments coming in, and some of them reflect a whole range of rumors that do their rounds on the internet. I know some people post some prophetic stuff. That my research in this says that there are people disagreeing on virtually every sector. We've got pastors disagreeing, we've got medics disagreeing, we've got researchers disagreeing, we've got prophets disagreeing. And I would just say, I think the key thing to look for is not whether you can find someone to say something you want to hear or don't want to hear, but it's to find people saying things that are peer tested and peer reviewed, whether they're a pastor or a prophet. You could probably search around and find a prophet saying anything you want them to say. I think that there are placebo prophecies around, to be honest, that they sound like the grand, but actually they do nothing. So just be mindful, just be careful. Look for peer review, look at the motive of people who are saying what they're saying, and just try to be wise in getting the facts. But thank you for being with us, Afi. We
Thank you,
will
Mark.
welcome you again very, very shortly, and we'll announce to everybody. So keep checking Rediscover's Facebook page for news of that next broadcast. But thank you, everybody, for being a part of this evening, and we will look forward to connecting with you again very soon. God bless you.